But you, like literally dozens of others, have decided that the MMO genre is dead. The sky is falling and we're in complete free fall, and we should all just turn our attention to games that are MMO light, lobby-based games like Fortnite. I mean, at least Fortnite had that, you know, that Dragon Ball Z crossover recently. That was cool, right? If that's the case, I invite you to join me as I try and prove you wrong on why MMOs are not actually dead, and why the genre may actually be thriving, and that the future might be bright. And to do that, we are going to be going to Tyria. Guild Wars 2 launched in 2012 as a buy-to-play title with, at the time, very impressive graphics that for the most part still hold up. It boasted an intriguing gameplay loop and the promise of difference. It catered to fans of PvP and PvE, with both large-scale PvP and smaller structured fare, as well as a world that really just came to life with a deep single-player narrative and a dynamic event system that responds to player actions. Guild Wars 2 has received its fair share of accolades over the year, including at launch, earning not just Best MMO, but Best PC Game of 2012 from IGN. Quite the way to launch your game. Guild Wars 2 wasn't actually the first game to throw single-player RPG elements into the middle of your MMO stew, but it certainly did it well, with much of the content over the years focusing on expanding this story in chapters. A story that can elicit emotional reactions from its players. If you see me sobbing in the corner, it's because the story was written well. The first chapter, Living Season 1, launched in early 2013, not long after the game's initial launch, adding new story content to the game in a multi-stage narrative. I wouldn't be surprised if Elder Scrolls Online looked at this part of Guild Wars 2's release schedule and used it as a model for their own year-long content releases. Living Season 2 launched in 2014. The first expansion, Heart of Thorns, launched in 2015, which coincided with the move to make the base game free to play. Heart of Thorns introduced the first new profession to the game since its launch, the Revenant, which balanced out the classes between the three different armor types, light, medium, and heavy, with 3 each. Yet again, Guild Wars 2 diverged from traditional MMOs as the level cap of 80 was not raised with the expansion, though they did add elite specializations. Side note here that the level cap has still not been raised above 80. 2016 saw Living Worlds Season 3, but it was 2017 when the game got a real shakeup with the second expansion, Path of Fire, alongside Living Worlds Season 4 in the same year. Mounts were added to the game, and in line with just about everything the game does, they were, can you guess the word here, different. Different mounts did different things and had their own abilities. Riding around on a raptor was one of the most fun experiences I've had on a mount, and someone really should tip their hat to ArenaNet for the systems they've created around mounts and the specific content for them. Each type has its own identity, and while there are certainly different types of cosmetics, which you'd come to expect with mounts in any game, the only other game I remember doing this well in recent memory was EverQuest 2, though I'm certain some of you can point out some of the other games that did it well in the comments below. And finally, to wrap up our history of the game, let's look at some recently reported numbers, or rather estimates, courtesy of Dexero, because no one can argue numbers. Dexero estimated in July of 2022 around 600,000 players were logging in per day to check out the newest expansion, End of Dragons, which launched earlier this year on February 2022. It should be noted that the source Dexero used for this number is mmopopulation.com. I've always found numbers like this to be more of an, oh, that's kind of cool statistic than anything concrete that I would bet money on. So with that dismissal of numbers, let's talk about some more, shall we? In a blog post on guildwars2.com updating on the 10th anniversary, it was stated that since launch on August 28th, 2012, 16 million players have stepped into Tyria from all over the world. Pretty incredible to think about. They didn't give any data on how this number was found, but with the title having free to play now, I'd hazard to guess it's accounts created. To put that in perspective, at the Endwalker pre-launch stream, Final Fantasy XIV reported 25 million registered accounts. Both of these are of course modest compared to World of Warcraft, which by its 10-year anniversary in 2014, had 100 million registered accounts. But one thing we can count on a little bit more than these reported numbers is investor documents. I don't pretend to fully understand these or even really remotely understand them, because honestly, I'm bad at math and even worse at making money. I'm pretty good at spending money I don't have though. Yeah. In NCSoft's Q2 2022 report, Guild Wars 2 was one of their bright spots, alongside the announcement that they'll be delaying Throne of Liberty to 2023. The game that's been in development for longer than Guild Wars 2 has been out. With a 3% quarter-over-quarter increase for PC games, they singled out Guild Wars 2 as the reason for that increase, and specifically, the End of Dragons expansion. And we'll just cheer on the 3% increase for PC games compared to the 26% drop for mobile games, and not actually look at the numbers that are astronomically different.
I'm in danger!
You know, yay PC games. The bright spots were evident even earlier in the year on Guild Wars 2's website. Following the launch of End of Dragons, it was mentioned that Guild Wars 2 players have more than doubled over the last 3 years, and that End of Dragons, the most recent expansion, has outsold Path of Fire, their second expansion, which did fairly well for Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 was and is different, so much so that back in 2012, Games Radar wrote an article on what makes it that way. Keep in mind, this was 10 years ago, so hold your gas for the end, as some of the innovations may seem pretty common in 2022. First was action-based combat. This wasn't the tab-targeting old-school play of World of Warcraft and EverQuest, and while I'd argue with the sentiment that Games Radar asserted that this made the combat more intense and the game more intense, it was certainly a change from the norm. Guild Wars 2 wasn't the first or last MMO to do action combat, but it still did it in its own unique way. Guild Wars 2 offers you the choice of 5 races and 8 base classes, 9 when you count the class that was added with the Heart of Thorns expansion. But don't be fooled by the relatively small class number, as Guild Wars 2 offers a weapon system that will alter the play of your class. Whether you're a ranged warrior with a cannon or a dual-wielding badass, that's all decided after the initial character selection. Out of the 10 skills you will have available to you, the first 5 are going to be determined by your weapon type. And since you can swap weapons on the fly, essentially that means you have 10 skills directly tied to your weapon choice. Which I guess technically also means you have 15 total skills, not just 10, but you know what, you get what I mean. I mentioned the weapon swapping here because to me, it is both positive and negative. Weapon swapping has been added into games as a way to add strategy and choice, but it's always felt a bit gimmicky to me. Hot swapping weapons mid-combat feels unrealistic. Unrealistic in a game with dragons and talking plants. But it's not just Guild Wars 2 that this bugs me, it bugs me in any game it's in. Elder Scrolls Online and New World also are really frustrating with this.
I'm in danger!
But of these games with weapon swapping, I think Guild Wars 2 does it the best by far. At least from a class fantasy perspective. Your class still influences your weapon choice, and it's not simply having abilities from your class you can use across all weapon types, but also having class-specific attacks with each type. A dagger for a thief has different skills than a dagger for an elementalist, for example. Just look at this side-by-side that essentially shows the same 2 weapons, just with some slight differences. It's dual wielding. But you can easily tell from the very first 2 skills used that there is a clear difference in the 2 classes. Now, who needs a holy trinity when everyone can jump around, heal themselves, and hurl doom onto your opponents?
Spicy doom.
No need for a cleric's res when anyone can revive you when you're downed but not out. Throwing your rocks with abandon or bursting into a last-ditch rage to hopefully take your opponent with you before you perish. In a now deleted blog post that is really only accessible using the Internet Archive, John Peters talks about the non-existence of the Holy Trinity back in 2011, specifically that their professions aren't dedicated healers, DPS, or tanks, because frankly, we built a combat system that just doesn't allow it. He goes further to break it down, but I want to highlight 2 parts beyond the down system. First, there's no allied targeting. No skills specifically target allies. Everything needs to be done with positioning and ground targeting. No sitting back and healing from the group bar. So embrace the multi-target AoE beneficials and look at the game, not the bars. Second is the healing skill slot. Everyone gets a heal. Everyone gets the ability to try to sustain themselves in battle. So really, if you fail, it's your fault. This all sounds very innovative, especially back in 2012 as the traditional Holy Trinity in MMOs was reigning supreme. It doesn't necessarily mean better, though. Many players who pick up Guild Wars 2 will miss the traditional roles, especially because honestly, They just kind of work in a lot of ways. Others will love the freedom though that it gives. Guild Wars 2 might be seen as one of the first salvos in the war against forced grouping in MMOs because it gave everyone the tools to do it solo. Ironically, they also encouraged social interaction, but in my opinion, without the friction that is caused by older MMOs. Imagine you're playing EverQuest. You've just pulled a quest mob and you're wailing away. Someone comes in and destroys the NPC with a fireball, leaving you distraught and angry. A social interaction has happened in-game, albeit a negative one, but it was caused because both you and the other player needed the same quest mob, and only one of you was going to get credit. Now imagine you intercede before this happens and offer to help them with the next spawn if they leave this one alone. They're amenable and you can chat with them while waiting for the next. Another social interaction has occurred. Now this can't really happen in Guild Wars 2 because quests are not handled the same way. Guild Wars 2 is specifically designed for cooperative play. You cannot steal a kill because rewards are personal. On the good side, this encourages positive social interactions because it's just simply beneficial to help. For me, the negative part of this comes from the lack of barriers, which might sound strange, but it disincentivizes grouping up with strangers. It's simpler and easier, but in some way encourages you to solo together. While this appeals to the socially anxious part of me, it also hurts what has been one of the most beautiful parts of an MMO to me: making friends with strangers. And sometimes people like me need an added incentive to make friends. If you don't make me make friends, I am going to be a fucking hermit. Essentially, Guild Wars 2 does a lot of new things, but pays homage to MMOs that came before it. It's very easy to get deeply invested in their personal story. The action combat will keep you on your toes, and the cooperative loose social elements will allow you to experience the game with as much or as little social interaction as you want. Talk to people or don't, the choice will be yours. It is a very low barrier to entry as well, with the base game being free and no subscription fee, making it one of the best investments you can make as an MMO player. And side note here, always be sure to let the game fully install before playing. While playable on the patcher is technically correct, doesn't always mean you should. Nani? See, someone really should have looked and stopped and paused and said, we can do this, but should we do this? There are two major milestones in Guild Wars 2's future: immediate future or immediate past, depending on when you're watching this. And one final tidbit that at least provides some faith that this game will be around for years to come. First is that Guild Wars 2 is launching on Steam, or has launched on August 23rd if it didn't see any further delays. If you're hoping to move over to Arena's launcher on Steam, well, you're going to need a brand new account. But other than that, this seems like it'll be a boon for Guild Wars 2. Now, not all MMO launches on Steam go over well, some end up being kind of irrelevant. I mean, comment down below if you remember that EverQuest is actually on Steam and has been since Guild Wars 2 launched. Here's hoping the launch of Steam works out better for Guild Wars 2, and with its modern, if you can count a 10-year-old game modern, style, I believe that it might be. Next is going to be the 10-year anniversary, a huge occasion for any MMO as many haven't made it to double digits. Starting August 23rd, new achievements will be in-game that take you across the breadth of content for the game. Each task will reward you with proofs of legend, which can be traded for a new decade armor set. Additionally, there will be a 30% bonus to Karma, Magic Find, PvP, and World vs. World progress, all starting on the same day. We'll also be getting our first Twitch drops for Guild Wars 2, and unlike some other MMOs that were selective in who had access to these drops, it sounds like any streamer will be able to enable them for their viewers. These Twitch drops will be active from the 23rd through the 28th of August. Finally, a fourth expansion has been confirmed for Guild Wars 2 to be in the works. Fresh off the heels of their success with End of Dragons, you can expect more content in-game for years to come. No details were given for the fourth expansion, but given the timelines we've seen so far, it'll probably be at least a few years before we really get anything concrete. If you missed the first episode of this series, where I try and debunk the idea that the MMO genre is dead, please take a look at this video over here, where I go into my personal favorite MMO, EverQuest. I show that even in an old game, a game released in 1999, there is bright spots on the horizon. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Redbeard Flynn, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.